Hi guys, welcome back again. The next installment of Jack's story. It's quite a heavy story, isn't it? I must say. It's bringing up a lot of things for me and wow, it's quite interesting. I was wondering if I should do a bit of a deep dive into it afterwards, maybe do some interviews or something. It's quite intense. However, without further ado, I will jump back into it. Okay. Chapter 27, The Shocking Revelation. Whenever he could, Jack visited the gambling den. People came and went. Jack lost count of the times it changed hands. The only thing that did not change was the gossip. One night, Jack heard a gravelly voice ask, "So, who built this place, and how come we can use it?" There was no answer for a while, until Jack heard the speaker give an interrogatory, impatient, "Huh?" "Sorry," came a reply from the deep, dark recess of the room. "Some bastard finicured his way into getting permission to build in this area." "Why the hell would everybody do that?" "No one really knows," piped up another voice. "Could be he wanted a safe harbour for his lady love. That's what most people think." "Boring. Ancient history. Who cares?" said another voice. "I care," Gravel voice said, sounding slightly menacing. "I'm sussing out this town, and I, for one, smell a rat. Ancient history. What are we talking about? 5 years? 10 years? 20 years? There was no answer. A young woman in an apron came up with trays of drinks in her hands. "Hello, I'm Cece. Is everything all right over here?" Gravel voice answered. "We were wondering when this house was built." "Oh, about 20 years ago. Perhaps not that long." "Who lived here?" "A black lady with her son. They say she had a white lover." Jack listened to the conversation with growing horror. Grace Kahari used to live in the house with her son Innocent, as he well knew. His body felt frozen. He was having difficulty breathing. With every fibre of his being, he wanted to shut out the conversation. "Come on, your bird," the man sitting at Jack's table said, throwing out his arm in frustration at him. They were at a critical point in the game, and he was about to lose everything, and here was this fresh-faced boy with the devil's own luck, dallying with their futures that were tied up in the cards on the table. However, the fresh-faced boy was impervious to his woes. His head reeling, Jack pushed his chair back and it scraped with an ugly screech along the floor. All the conversation pointed to one explanation. Innocent was his brother. In one way he had always known. Memories crowded in on him. Half-heard bits of conversations, unexplained happenings, body language, explanations denied, hovered like ghosts of time past. He'd never been brave enough to face the truth. "I'm out," he croaked. Gravel voice was still at it. He said with a harsh, disbelieving snort, "Give me a break. The Immorality Act was enforced 20 years ago. There was no way races could mix." Just then, a tall, slender man approached the table. He had a high forehead, receding hair, and a pockmarked face. Jack felt a wave of revulsion. He stepped back into the shadows as he recognized his mother's friend, Palmer Conway. There was something about that man he really did not like. Evil emanated from his thin body and disfigured face. Good evening, the man said, and held out his hand to Gravel Voice. Gravel Voice stood, grasping the hand outstretched to him, and replied in a subservient tone quite different from the bullying way he had been using with Cece and the others. Good evening to you, boss. Would you like a drink? Jack made his escape. With it went his gambling aspirations. He never went back to gambling at the cellar. He walked down to Timothy's house to retrieve his car, which was hidden in the garage. Then he drove slowly to the T-junction with the main road. Once he'd gotten there, he smashed the gear lever into fifth gear and roared down Sheba Road. He rolled down the windows, hoping the air blowing through would clear his brain from the unthinkable ideas and images that were swirling around there. He pushed his car and himself to the limit around the steep curves and hills. When he got up to the cableway, he pulled over to the side of the road. He turned off the ignition and sat in the darkness, his mind roiling. In the silence, he heard the ticking of the engine as the car cooled down. And behind that, other night sounds. Crickets, beetles, mice scurrying. Eventually his mind calmed and he relaxed into the seat of his car. He must have slept then, because he awoke, stiff and sore, as dawn was breaking. He drove slowly down to his aunt's flat. She was up and dressed, just sitting down to breakfast. She opened the door to his knock, and taking one look at his ravaged face, she drew him gently inside, putting her arms around him. "What is it, dear heart?" she asked, her voice filled with compassion. In the kitchen, she wrapped a blanket around him. "My father," Jack began, his voice wobbled. "I heard something about him and Grace and Innocent." She spoke in soothing tones as she made him a cup of coffee, heaping it with sugar. "Nothing as bad as it seems," she said. "We'll weather this storm. Don't you fret, my darling boy." She handed him the coffee. It had been years coming, this moment, Elaine thought. Of all the people to deal with it, why me? She chided herself for her reaction. Jack was more important than her feelings. "It was a long time ago," she said gently. "I can't explain it without saying some uncharitable things about your mother, my love. I'm so sorry you had to find out." "No, don't be, Auntie Elle. I really want to know the truth." "Well, my version. It all happened years ago. Your parents had a huge fight and misunderstanding, and your father, in his rage and fury, behaved in a really unforgivable way, using Grace to get at your mother and totally disregarding Grace's feelings and rights. And, oh, I don't know, he began an affair with Grace when she was lonely and vulnerable and had been kicked out of the house by your mother and was virtually homeless and friendless. And the worst thing of all was that Grace was only 19 at the time. By the time your father came to his senses, Grace was pregnant with Innocent, and your mother just had you. And after a horrific and traumatic birth. Give him his due, your father tried his best to make up for his actions for the rest of his life. And believe me, your mother made him pay. Elaine saw Jack's stricken face and was instantly contrite. I'm so sorry, I didn't need to say that." Jack swallowed the last of the coffee. He was feeling strangely calm. "I'm glad I know. I can't take any more, though. The last thing in the world I want to do right now is go to school. But Minia de Villiers has called an emergency meeting and I dare not miss it. I must go home and change and face my mother, I suppose. I wonder if she's frantic. I've been out all night, you know." He rushed off, taking no notice of Elaine's pleas to stay, and in no time at all he was at home. He entered the house expecting a confrontation, but it was all quiet. When he looked in his mother's room, he saw she was fast asleep. His bedroom door was shut, and Jack assumed she must have thought that he was in bed asleep and had not checked. Jack speedily showered and dressed and sped off to school. He burst into the prefect's room. "Am I late?" he asked. "Where's the headmaster?" Everyone turned to face him. The prefect's room was packed. Dan was there, and Adam and Kate. Zachary sat with Innocent at his side. Jack felt lightheaded. The shattering revelation from last night, combined with the lack of sleep, made him feel as if he was in some surreal nightmare world where the impossible and undreamed of was the norm. His eyes rested on Innocent. Innocent, his brother. Did Innocent know? 1,000 conflicting emotions surged through Jack's body. "Innocent," he croaked, holding out his hand. Innocent stood up and took a step towards Jack, his usually cheerful face puzzled. Jack froze. How could this be happening to him? Discovering relatives across the race divide like this was not part of his world. Before his father's death, he thought life was simple and predictable. He yearned to go back to that time before he had any awareness of the random nature of life, where an accident of birth ensures one young man safe and another vulnerable, where one young man receives a sports car for his birthday, while his brother empties the trash to make much-needed money. The prefect's room faded from Jack's consciousness. He was transported to the yard at the Coco Pan restaurant during his birthday celebrations. Innocent was speaking. His words hung in the velvet darkness. "Our Father," he had said. "Our Father. Not our fathers. Dad. Not Dad's." Innocent knew. He had always known. He must have assumed Jack knew. The vision faded. Jack was back in the prefect's room, and Innocent was moving towards him. Jack heard the concern in Innocent's voice. "What's going on, Summerfield? Are you all right? Do you need anything?" Jack realized he could not blurt out what was in his mind. He would have to wait for another time. He forced himself to take control of his emotions. "I'm fine, bro," he said. He stepped forward and grasped Innocent's hand. Their eyes met. Innocence inquiring but upbeat, and Jack's determinedly positive, hiding his turmoil. The door opened and the headmaster entered. Chapter 28. Drugs. Never had Meneer de Villiers seemed as fierce and intimidating as now. He strode up and down, his broad shoulders forward, his feet stamping on the floor of the prefect's room. Rigid with apprehension, the prefects gazed up at him. "Drugs," the headmaster proclaimed dramatically. "They are rife in the school. The police have been on to me once again, and I must take action." He strode up and down once more, his long legs pounding the ground. "We cannot let the present situation continue. The drug dealers are here among you. They are preying on the students you, as prefects, have sworn to serve. It is up to all of us to keep vigilant, and if anything seems out of the ordinary, to report it immediately." Meneer de Villiers picked up a hockey stick and smashed it down on the palm of his hand in a most disconcerting way. The police will bring a team of trained experts to search every nook and cranny of the school to see if they can unearth any evidence of drugs. I'm determined to root out the drug problem before it develops, he roared. He stood still for a moment. Then he banged the hockey stick violently on the floor of the prefect's room. I spent all night going over my plans in my head of how to solve this problem. I never thought such a heinous crime would be perpetrated against my students. But this is the reality. Truancy is at an all-time high, and grades are dropping across every subject. It must be drugs, and the drug dealers are here in our midst. This stops today. He glared around the room. His prefects quake. I look at you all, and I see such potential. And then last night, when I was at my lowest ebb, it came to me. It's not just my school, it's our school. Together we can beat the scourge. And if anyone knows anything about the drugs, report to me immediately. Prefects dismissed. Prefects dismissed indeed. It was the beginning of a busy day, explaining the headmaster's plans to the students. Clear out your locker, said Jack for the umpteenth time, and get a move on. Remember, the police will be searching the school tomorrow, so make sure you've not left anything in that shouldn't be here. Stop fooling around. It's nearly time for the bell. That's it, Dan said when the last of the students left the campus. Fancy a game of squash, Jack? You've got to be joking, Jack answered. I'm heading straight for home. I'm not looking forward to tomorrow at school with the police there. Dan looked at him in surprise. Jack was usually ready for anything after school. Rough night, Jack muttered, wondering how he would ever drag his exhausted body along, not at all sure he would even make it home. His muscles screamed, and last night's sleep in the car had left him blurry-eyed and stiff. He was physically and emotionally wrung out, and all he could think of was his bed. Come on, Jack. A game of squash will sort you out. Don't be a trip. Have a heart, Kate said, giving Jack a searching look. You must admit he looks pretty rough. Oh, go on then, Dan said, with a weak wave of his hand, and Jack escaped. His troubles were not over, however. When he arrived at his home, he saw several cars parked outside, and as he opened the front door, the noise of conviviality and laughter met his ears. His heart sank. His mother was having an early drinks party. Jack stood in the doorway, not sure how to proceed. All he really wanted to do was go upstairs and sleep forever. To do that, he had to navigate the length of the room. His heart quailed. Would he ever manage? One of the guests touched Rose Summerfield's arms, and she turned and saw her son standing in the doorway. The light from outside threw his silhouette into relief, and she saw with a shock that he looked wild. His hair stood on end, his clothes were crumpled. He entered the room and shut the door behind him. His face was ravaged, his eyes wide and staring. Lines of stress ran from his mouth to his chin, making him look old and grim. Jack, my darling boy, home so early? Her voice was full of solicitude and concern as she made her way to his side. Putting on a show for her friends, Jack thought to himself with unusual venom. Two can play at that game. But all he said was, Yes, I had a hard day and I need to go upstairs for a while. Not so fast, my love, she said as she put an arm around his waist and propelled him forward. Come, you must meet some of my friends. You know Gideon van Jaarsveld, of course. He shook Gideon van Jaarsveld's hand, thinking, He's always here. When does this Okie ever work in his office? Jack met all the people in the room, amazed to be introduced to the legendary detective Mike Markham, while niceties tripped from his lips and Rose looked more and more proud of her wonderful son. Finally, they stopped before a tall, thin man whose back was slightly turned as he helped himself to brandy. "Palmer," Rose cooed, "you remember my son, Jack?" Palmer Conway seemed to swoop down on Rose like a falcon might swoop on a mouse. He pounced on her hand and raised it to his lips. "Of course, my lovely one," he said, then turned towards Jack. Jack came face to face with the pock-marked intruder from last night. Had Palmer Conway registered that it was Jack in the cellar? What if he told Rose? Jack was at a loss for words. "Hello, Jack. Of course I remember you. Say, have I seen you somewhere recently?" he asked, his eyes suddenly intent. Rose seemed not to notice the sudden tension in her son's shoulders and the hostile expression on his face. She laughed. "You couldn't possibly have, Palmer. He lives and breathes Barberton Hoor School. What have you been up to at school today, my dear boy?" She turned to Jack, as if suddenly becoming aware that he was home at an unusual time of day. "They've found drugs at our school, Mother," he blurted out. Then he could have kicked himself. He felt tired and discombobulated and wrong-footed. How could he have revealed such sensitive information, especially in front of a stranger? Then, to his horror, he heard himself stumbling on, trying to cover up his error in a sea of words. "You'll be getting a call from the school. It's become quite a problem, and Mynheer de Villiers is on the warpath. He thinks he knows who's behind it." Palmer Conway's hand shook, and he quickly placed his wine glass on the table. What are you saying? This is very unwelcome news." He sounded shocked. "I certainly hope nothing like this is happening at my daughter's school in Nelspruit." "I didn't know you had a daughter," Rose said. "Yes, I have. Alyssa. She's 16. "Well, fancy that." Rose turned her attention back to Jack. "Jack, that's startling news. I'll hear more about it from you later. Meanwhile, you've done nobly, my son. Thank you for meeting all these strangers. A teenager's nightmare. Now you can head upstairs unless you'd like something to eat or drink." "Not right now," said Jack, and made his escape. He couldn't cope with what had just happened. He fell onto his bed and sank into a deep sleep. Awesome. Well. This is getting to be more and more eventful, isn't it? Okay, well, thank you very much for joining me, and I'll be back tomorrow to see what the police find. See ya. Bye.